to another video from the Mystical Convert channel. Today we are going to be talking about a saint that has the ability to levitate off the ground. Joining me today is Benedict to tell you guys more about the story of Saint Joseph.
Thank you, Patrick. To elaborate more about Saint Joseph, his life started in a shed in Cupertino, Italy. His father was sadly deceased before he was even born, and his mother was left with a massive amount of debt. When Joseph was growing up, he was known to be very slow. He would stand in the middle of the street with his mouth hanging open, staring at nothing for hours. People used to call him the open mouth.
He grew up slower than other kids his age, which is sad.
Yes, he had a very sad childhood, and it got even sadder. In his teens, he had tried to become a shoemaker, but he had failed. Then after that, he had tried to join the Capuchin monks, but they had kicked him out after 8 months because he was known to be too clumsy and he broke almost everything he touched.
Wow, Benedict, that must be a very sad childhood. Pursuing shoemaking and pursuing the monastery is two very different things. You can tell that he has given up his normal career and he has lost hope for himself when he joined the monastery.
As a lot of people like to say, when he was 20 years old, he was known as a total failure.
He had no ambitions at this point.
But surprisingly, in 1625, he was finally accepted as a stable boy for a Franciscan monastery. He became extremely devout in Catholicism. One day, when the monks were singing and chanting, something happened to him. During the procession for St. Francis, Joseph let out a shriek and launched into the air. The way he launched into the air wasn't like he was jumping. He literally flew over the heads of the crowd and landed on the altar. He was at the back of the church, and suddenly he leaped to the front altar.
And this wasn't a small church, it was quite a huge church, right?
Yes, it was a full procession. But when witnesses described his flight, they used to call it as if he was a bird, and he wouldn't even realize that he was flying. When he came down, he would be confused and embarrassed. 1638, Joseph was brought to Rome to see Pope Urban VIII. When Joseph bent down to kiss the feet of the Pope, he was so overwhelmed with emotion that he hovered in the air several feet above the floor until his superior monk ordered him to come back down.
We can see a correlation. When Saint Joseph feels an overwhelming sense of emotions, he would levitate off the ground.
Many people were so joyful and terrified that he could fly that an admiral of the Spanish Navy was so terrified that he nearly fainted.
Yeah, I would be too if I saw this.
One important thing to note is, witnesses said that Joseph could fly carrying heavy weights and heavy objects, and he could land on small tin candles.
So he had the ability to defy gravity, but also land on fragile things, but it wouldn't break.
They used to say he was like a bird. He would carry all that weight, but when he landed on fragile things, they never broke.
We can see how amazing God is to be able to give someone an ability that is so amazing that us humans cannot even explain it.
When he was arrested in the years of the Spanish Inquisition, the Holy Office became suspicious of him. They thought the ability he had to fly might have been demonic or a threatening hope.
Because it is very common for someone under demon possession to levitate off the ground.
The verdict is, at that time they couldn't prove that it was magic, but they decided he was too famous and it was too weird that he could do that, because his presence caused a public disorder that thousands of people would go there just to see him fly. That after they arrested him, they decided to do an act of disappearing him. For 35 years, he was treated like a high security inmate or prisoner. They were so suspicious of him that in the middle of the night, in a closed carriage, just to keep it secret, they used to transport him so no one would ever know where he was. And during this time, he was forbidden from speaking to any person, which is a lay person, writing or receiving letters, or eating with other monks.
So that was the lowest point in his life, not being able to socialize or talk with anybody, even a random stranger. Must be a difficult experience for someone to endure.
At that time, if a monk was caught talking to him, that monk would be excommunicated. But the saddest part throughout his life was in 1663, when Saint Joseph fell ill in the town of Osimo. Even when he was dying, his gift that God gave him, it never stopped. Witnesses reported that when he received his final rite, he sat up and hovered several inches above his bed.
Wow, so what we can take away from this is that even at our lowest point, God is always present. Even though Saint Joseph went through all of that, God was still with him. And I believe that that is one of the forces that kept him going.
He died at the age of 60. Eventually, the church realized that they couldn't explain, so they canonized him as a saint, and he is now the patron saint of pilots, astronauts, and students taking exams.
What I really love about the Catholic Church is that we have all of these miracles that are recorded, and we cannot find this elsewhere in other faiths. I hope you guys enjoyed this video about Saint Joseph. Bye.